On today's episode of The Ownership Advantage, I'm joined by Gregory and Kimberly Gavin, who are the owners of ByteBak Solutions. We break down the number one mistake that business owners make when it comes to their IT solutions. And I'll tell you, the answer may likely surprise you. We explore simple, practical steps that any business owner can take to improve their cybersecurity, starting with training your team. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Alrighty, I'm so excited to be jumping into some IT conversations, maybe a little bit of cybersecurity, but I want to start with a question here today. And that question is simply, what's the biggest mistake that you see business owners, or specifically small business owners, making in the IT world today?
The incorrect platforms, the incorrect, they have really old computers, they try to milk it. And I get that people want their return on investment, but when it comes to computers, 5 to 6 years is that mark that you really have to move forward. And I would say that's probably the biggest mistake that they make, is just trying to hang on to old tech and bring that last dollar out of it. And at that point, the technology actually becomes a hindrance to their business, not a help. It can, oftentimes.
What's the vulnerability that comes with, holding on to maybe some computer systems too long? For those that are maybe pushing it to 10 years and having a computer that long, what's the big vulnerability that comes along with that?
Vulnerability is you don't get the upgrades that are necessary, whether it's security upgrades, firmware upgrades. You end up, that is the biggest thing there. You don't, after a while, which is one of the things that Microsoft does, is they actually provide, their software has an end of life. And at the end of life, they stop pushing out upgrades. So if you're not getting upgrades or updates, firmware updates, anything like that, and you're holding on to a 10-year-old system, still trying to run same applications and do what you were doing that ran your business 10 years ago, you're not going to get those security updates, which leaves you wide open for any kind of attack that can happen, because your system becomes a vulnerability business, becomes vulnerable, very vulnerable. And if you don't upgrade, you're not going to get those. And that's one of the biggest things about not holding on to an old system.
The other thing that I would add to that is, the software and the hardware manufacturers, the Microsofts of the world, and the Intuits, you name it, right? They're in a very much of a push-pull symbiotic relationship. So the hardware guys will come up with a brand new processor, new system board that's running really fast and does all this cool stuff. And then the software guys look at it and say, oh, great, we can make our systems do all this new stuff. And then, so after a while, it taxes the hardware to the point where now it's starting to run slow, because the software people have designed their software to make maximum use out of the hardware. And so after a while, it just kind of grinds to a halt, where you're like, why does it take us so long? Well, it's taking so long because this thing was designed to be on a CPU that's doing, a gazillion amount of processes per second. And your system can't do that. So now it's trying to do that, but it just can't get there. The other one is a TPM, which is a security standard. Originally, when it came out with, is a hardware level security key. Think of it that way, to simplify it. And it helps keep your system safe. And this is an actual physical chip on your system. So originally, they didn't even have any of that. The system was just wide open, so people could actually attack the system from the hardware level. Then they came out with TPM1. They made it a little bit harder to hack the actual hardware. Now they're on a TPM2. And that's why Windows 11 doesn't run on older PCs, because this has TPM1. You need TPM2 to run that. Don't ask me what TPM stands for, because I forget acronyms sometimes.
Yeah, I forget acronyms as well.
There's a gazillion of them in IT.
Oh man, that's so interesting. I never would have thought about especially just being a business owner, right? Not being in that world. I always like to have like newer computers and new systems, all that kind of stuff. But the realization that the software may have or even the hardware both have a life cycle to them, and that inherently can lead to some challenges. So I'm excited, because I think there's going to be a lot of education that we can dig into in this conversation today for the business owners. But let's take a step back. So for those that haven't met you, give us a brief introduction, and I'd love to hear just a little bit of what got you all into this industry, why start ByteBak Solutions. Give us a little bit of history about the two of you and the business that you all have built.
Well,
For me, computers, electronics in general, and technology, I just a fiend for this stuff. I love science and all that stuff. So I was always into it, even from a kid. Building things, soldering irons, the whole 9 yards. And so when I started working with computers, it was just like a natural fit. It just made sense to me. And that's how I got into computers, and I decided to go back to college. This is where I met her. And doing IT. It was called digital something the other. Anyways, I took that, and I realized that I was actually doing stuff for free for people. Like I'd go to the community center, they had a bunch of computers, I'd hook them up and make them work and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a passion that I had that started saying, well, why not get paid for it? So I went and found a job for it, and I was working this job, how ByteBak got started. I was a senior engineer for a major hospital up north, but from Massachusetts originally. And after I built this $1 million backup system to literally back up 500 servers, and it worked perfectly. Every day I look at the screen, success. I do little test restores. Okay, we're good. And I was bored. And they laid me off. They were like, thank you for building the system. Have a nice life. And so she got off her job when I told her, and we rode around and literally we prayed on it, and we talked about it, we prayed on it, and she had been talking to me about doing my own thing. And finally, I said, okay. And then she actually named it. ByteBak is a play on bits and bytes. So, because our original slogan was fight back with ByteBak, right? So, and that's really how the business got started. And at the time, had one customer, just one. And this is the guy that I was taking care of on the side. That just kind of ballooned over time when it was decided. And of course, I didn't want to do it alone. So I said, okay, well, I'll do it if you join me. And that's kind of how that went.
but at the time, actually, cybersecurity is a second career for me. I actually started as an admin assistant, and I had been an admin assistant for over 20 years.
Wow.
So I went back to school. And up in Massachusetts, I went back to school. I got my associate's degree from a community college. And that community college, I got my associate's in computer information technology. That community college, when I graduated, there was an all-women's college called ByteBak University. And they were looking for females who were graduating from the community college to enter into their cybersecurity program, and they had to be graduating from computer information technology. Well, there were, I think, 4 women that graduated, but I'm the only one that took them up on the offer. And they took all of my credits, and I was able to obtain my bachelor's from ByteBak University with a degree in cybersecurity and a minor in digital forensics in a year and a half.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was a push, but I did it. I did do it. And because we met in school, so we've been together
Long time.
And he was doing computers, and I was like, well, you know what? So I would actually do computers with him, and I was learning on it and learning how it worked, and so I was like, okay.
Well, I got to tell you that story,
No.
if I can.
Okay.
So she kept bugging me. She wanted to build a computer. I want to build a computer. And she just kept saying it. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then, to be honest with you, I kind of half believed her, right? Finally,
Blew me off.
So finally, there was a computer show, because they don't really do them anymore, but years ago that you could go, they'd have these shows, you could go buy all the components and you could build your own thing. So I said, well, come on, we're going to go to a computer show. And we went down there and we bought the chassis and the motherboard and all the stuff. And so I'm being very elementary. Well, this is the processor, and this is the A1 socket, and this is the, and while I'm talking, she's going click, 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 click. And then I looked up and all the parts were in, and I just finally just walked away and said, call me when you're ready to turn it on. And I really, at that point, I really said, yeah, you really need to do this, because most people would have no clue where to put any of this stuff. You just kind of looked at it like a puzzle, went click, and it worked. We used that computer for years, actually.
Yeah, we sure did.
Oh man, that's amazing. I love the stories. I really do. And, when we were talking offline before we kind of started the recording here, you'd mentioned kind of the difference between skill sets and things like that from more the cybersecurity side of things to some of the infrastructure side of things. Sounds like, the skill sets that you all have are very complementary as you kind of grow through the business. So maybe give us a little bit of context on, deeper understanding of those skills that you all have and kind of where things fit into this whole IT solutions for business owners and how you each kind of fit into different aspects of what a business owner may need to be thinking about.
So I come from the hardware side of the house because I Microsoft partner, certified, Cisco, Microsoft, Citrix. I mean, just a bunch of different sort of education, I should say, more of a general umbrella here, along with the college stuff to learn about computers. And so I came from the operating system, as in Windows and Cisco CLI, command line interface, that side of the house. And so physical devices, servers, firewalls, routers, switches, Wi-Fi access points, those kinds of things. That's where I really cut my teeth on. And so that's where I still work to this day. And we dovetail on the cybersecurity part. I'd love to tell you her side of the house, but for me, it's like really comes on the firewall and hardening people's network against intrusion from the internet from a hardware appliance side of things. And she does.
I do what I do.
Not enough.
Well, basically, I've been interested in computers for a long time. I did them in high school for a company called Mass Mutual Insurance Group. And I did that for a little bit. And then I just became an admin assistant and got out of computers, but pretty much dilly-dallied in them a little bit. So when I was working with him, when we were working together, and I still had some things I knew I needed to learn, and he was willing to teach them to me, and then I just took off from there. But basically, what got me into cyber is, to be honest, I don't like when people steal. I hate it. It's my biggest pet peeve. And one of the things where cyber fits is that it's all the hardening of the hardware he does. That's one of the ways we actually dovetail upon other things. But sometimes there are people who get a phishing email and not sure of the email. I actually dive into it to find out whether it's legitimate or not. Vulnerability, pen testing, patching. Sometimes it requires research. And then when the research comes, you go down this rabbit hole because you find, and you have to be willing to say, okay, and be willing to go down a rabbit hole because there's some research involved about vulnerabilities that happen. And where it fits and how hackers got in. And then there's the different kind of threat actors there are, whether they're nation state or just whether they're from other countries or just local. So you got to figure out where they are and be able to research that. And sometimes it does require you going down a rabbit hole, but you got to be willing to go down that rabbit hole.
So let me add to that too. Just when she says rabbit hole, that sounds so general, right? But to give you a scenario. So we actually had this happen several times, many times actually. Customer will get an email. It's a phishing email that's telling the CFO, send $100,000 to this place over here, or send a bunch of gift cards over here, that kind of stuff, or anything like that. There's even been some invoice scams where people will get an invoice that looks like it's legit, and you pay it. Well, of course, the money doesn't go to who you think it should go to. And what she'll do is she'll actually look at the header, and that's where all the information of how the email was transferred. She'll open up the email and get the header part of it, and then she'll go through and see, was there a payload in there? A payload meaning some kind of virus, malware, or something that's going to harm your computer. And then when she does that, we'll go even further and look and say, okay, well, this is the IP address it came from. Because the IP address, people don't realize it, but regardless of who you have, AT&T, Spectrum, it doesn't matter. Assign, it doesn't matter. All of them assign you an IP address. And those IP addresses can identify you to your location. So then we'll actually take that IP address and get a general location where you are, right? And sometimes it's given in longs and lats, longitude and latitudes. We'll plug that into Google Earth, and we've actually been able to drill it right down to the house the person is sitting in. Here's where this thing came from, or what country did it come from, And then to kind of wrap this up, sometimes people will have an attack on their firewall. It will do something called geofencing that says that IP addresses that are coming from outside the country, can't get there for management purposes. Now you can still get an email if you've got your order from Temu, or you're doing some other foreign site. You can still get that site, but they can't now come and try to attack your firewall, which is what they do. Yes. If you get a home router, one of the biggest mistakes that we see is businesses using home equipment in their business, because they're very different animals. They think they may do the same job, but it's not the same. A little small compact car will get you down the road, but it's not a Ferrari.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I want to jump on the internal policies side of things, because I think, having seen some of this firsthand, unfortunately, in kind of past roles that I've been around, and being someone who has seen emails and text messages and things like that, that now I kind of know what to look for, what might be phishing attempts and things like that. Maybe let's take a minute and kind of talk about how important it is to be able to maybe detect a little bit of that. If you're thinking of just employees within a company, don't have the training, don't know all the things that they may need to look for, but what are some things that would be helpful for them to see? Hey, maybe I should ask a different question about this email before clicking this link or the attachment. Or we talked about the text messages on toll bills and things like that. That's like really big right now. Maybe let's talk a little bit about that in terms of what are some things that a business owner can do to help their team know what to look for, or as an individual contributor, what can they be paying attention to help stay away from these vulnerabilities?
Especially with regards to phishing emails, one of the things you can look at that are big red flags: spelling. Pay attention to the spelling. A lot of times they'll switch an O for a 0, or they'll do a URL that says the URL is actually, I'll just say ByteBak.net, BYTEBAK, but .net, and they're spelling BYTEBACK, and you don't think anything about it, and you click on a link. You click on whatever they're sending you. Things to that nature. But spelling is a big one with regards to phishing emails, where they, whether or not they want you to click. Another big thing is there's an urgency to it. They want you to say, click this right now. Big red flag. A lot of times businesses don't want you to click anything right now. They're just trying to give you some information. But a lot of times that is also a big one. Another big one is, what's the other one I was thinking of? I can't think of what it slipped my mind.
In emails, you can look at the address where it came from. Because I can set up an email. I can set up an email that says it came from you. But if you really look close at it, it'll say from Tanner. But when you actually look at the end of it, it might say Joe Schmo from Kokomo I'm going to get you.net, right? The actual email address, that's usually the smaller part. But the part that I see is Tanner. So I don't bother to read the rest of the email address. I just see it's from Tanner. And click, away you go. So I would say the number one thing is to educate your people, to tell them about these things. You should always do some kind of in-service training with your folks on this. Going back, one politician actually said, trust but verify, right? So a lot of times you can do what we will do phishing expeditions to see who nibbles. And we put out an email that's really, really attractive, like, hey, we try to deliver this package at your house. You won this prize. Any of those things like that makes people go like, oh man, what did I get? Because people, we love gifts. People
love free.
Yeah, so. And you immediately start clicking on it. So half of it, the trust but verify part, is to actually send a phishing email to your people after they've had a training to see who clicks. And then you re-educate them again. Hey, you got to go. And after a while, it becomes the scarlet letter, oh man, I got to. Who's going to be trained? That guy clicked, she clicked, he clicked. Oh man. And they all kind of walk into the room like, yeah, we did it.
Well,
yeah.
that was also my big thing about knowing who the email sender, because the sender could be someone but their email address could be compromised. So it's always best to, instead of replying, if you have a question at all, instead of replying to the email, give that person a call.
Yeah.
Or send them a fresh email, one that you created.
Yep, or send them a fresh. If you have a question, don't reply to that original email they sent you.
So let me tell you one of the most egregious things I heard. As a matter of fact, I went to a cybersecurity seminar last Thursday. And the guy who was the trainer, he said he did a bonehead thing, right? When I say bonehead, no brain, just bone, all right? And so what happened was he was closing out his house. He gave his wife the wire transfer numbers. Wife digitally went in, hon, I got you. I'm going to get this house. I'm going to transfer the $50,000. I'm going to do this right now. She did it. The money never showed up. Right? So what they do sometimes, if they can get a bot, as like a robot, but a bot, or some kind of agent on your machine where they can actually do keyloggers or they can see all the stuff that's going back and forth with your email, the bad guy will just be patient. Lurkers, what they call it, dwellers. They just kind of dwell and just kind of sit there and wait. And when it comes time to actually do the wire transfer, that's when they jump in and they'll send their email that sends the wrong wire transfer information. Now they got you. Once you transfer that money, that's it.
It's done.
It's gone.
Man in the middle attack.
Yep.
That's what it's called.
So that's
a really good example. So I'd give you a little bit of history. I was in the banking industry for a while, most recently with B of A. And, you would hear different things like that because that situation clearly does happen, especially if it's a large institution. They're going to see things like that with some of their customers and things like that. You hear stories of it, but such a painful thing to have something like that happen. But the other thing that came to mind was when you're at a large company like that, they actually have trainings for their team members, which is fantastic. And I remember that exact thing. You go through training and then they're gonna send some emails out and see who clicks the buttons and you get a little note saying you failed the test. Like, oh dang it. But it's an easy way to learn those things kind of through practice, or for an employer being able to see here's the folks we probably need to spend a little bit more time with and help them recognize some of these patterns.
Sure.
Definitely.
So let's talk a little bit more about not upgrading computer systems, right? We started on that particular one. Is it just computer systems? How often should businesses be looking at some of the remainder of their hardware? How often should things be updated? And if you were to prioritize, what are the things that need to be updated first? Like how do you approach that with someone who's really never thought about it before?
So end of life for most computer systems is 5 to 7 years. That's kind of like the run that you're going to get out of them before you really have to do something. There are multiple levels. There's obviously the computer, right? But there's also things like your network switches. The network switch it's not like a wall switch. It's actually that box that has 1 million Ethernet cables plugged to the front of it. It's called a switch. And like firewalls and routers. So people don't think about that. And believe it or not, printers. Printers last a really long time. But again, they have found ways to come in through. They look for soft spots, the bad guys. So again, you got to remember when these companies put out updates, they say what we're fixing. We're fixing this vulnerability over here or this over there. Well, that's a roadmap for the bad guys, for all the people that say, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. And we've all seen it. They keep clicking later. They never want to let it stop and actually do the updates. And so the end result is that they'll get whacked at the end. So it's about 5 to 7 years on average. And then it's also based on performances. If your company is growing, say you started off with a company of 5 people or 2 people or 3 people, whatever. And then now you're suddenly 10, 15, 20 people. Well, the hardware that you have may not be able to handle the amount of throughput you need. So again, that will be another reason why just kind of to keep up. You don't want to be on, as I said, we don't like to put people on the bleeding edge, right? And we don't want to be on the trailing edge. We want to kind of be safely in that middle position, kind of forward of the middle position. You don't want to be that you're already old tech when you come in. But the latest and greatest stuff is usually the stuff that costs the most, right? So you want to kind of position yourself in that sweet spot right there. And that's what we try to do with our clients. A lot.
Yes.
Okay. Does the, not to call out like any manufacturers for being like really good or really bad, but does it matter the hardware that you do choose? From a computer standpoint, does it matter if it's an Apple versus a Microsoft versus Dell versus HP versus like any of the other providers out there? How do you navigate through maybe some of those questions that a business owner may have?
Basically, we tell them it depends on what is it you actually want your business to do and how you want it to function. Because a lot of times with specific, whether it's Windows or Apple, or it depends on how you're actually going to use this hardware, how you're actually going to use it, how is it being used within your businesses, which is one of the reasons why we make it a point to meet do an initial consultation and we say we're meeting your network. We're meeting you, but we're also meeting your network, because that's important. When we don't want to just say, okay, here, do this and throw it at you. It's nothing like that. Well, your business sounds like this, so here you go. And they're like, okay, well, I only told you this over the phone. How are you going to tell me what I need? Sure. So we're like, okay, slow it down just a little bit. And that's why we do an initial consultation, because we want to meet you and your business, but we also want to meet your technology and what you have. Because you're in business to make money, which we all are, but you also have to make your technology work for you. We don't want you running around, your business, your technology controlling you. We want you to control your technology and make it work for you. And that's the best way to handle it, because it's like there is no one size fits all. Not everything fits for everybody.
So in terms of Apple and Windows, so they're both operating systems that sit on top of hardware. And until recently, pretty much all of it was Intel when you strip out the cover, or AMD, right?
Yep.
Apple just recently, I think it's called M1 processor, they just recently started making their own processor. But up until then, pretty much they were all PCs. And I'm sure an Apple guy would want to punch me in the mouth kind of thing, right? But that's the truth of the matter. So, and really what the difference between the two operating systems came down to, what are you trying to do? Now, if you're just pure number crunching, just doing regular Word, Excel, word processing, we won't even use Word, Excel, because it can't be any of those word processing type programs, then primarily, most times, that's a Windows thing. If you are more on the artsy side of the house, where you're doing graphic arts, you're doing some kind of design work, you're doing music, stuff like that, that tends to fall in the Mac world, because it's a little more playful in that regard. And you just find that if you go to a design shop of any kind, right, you're almost always going to see Mac. Even architect shops, you're going to see Macs. If you go in somewhere where that requires a high degree of number crunching, there's a lot of math involved, a high finance, you're going to see just all Windows. So really the two worlds, and sometimes you see a little hybrid back and forth where they'll have a bit of both. But that's primarily the main thing that is. Now, in terms of manufacturer, one over the other, does it make a difference? No, not really, because they're all AMD or Intel inside. If you look on it, they'll say, AMD Ryzen 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. Intel 1, 2, 3, 4, I 1, 2, 3, 4, so on, right? So they're all the same. Now, what I will say is, with those large manufacturers, as opposed to going to somebody who's building a bunch of laptops or something in their garage, they'll call up Intel or AMD and say, listen, we want the system board made like this, because we have bench tested our stuff and we want it to perform in a certain way. And of course, at that point, if Dell calls up, they're telling Intel, hey, we're going to get 1 million units. Intel's going to say, yes, sir, jump how high? So it's going to be one of those. So that's really the difference. Now, does it matter? I like Dell machines. I like HP. I like Lenovo. I kind of go case by case, but usually I usually go Dell most of the time, because in terms of just getting firmware updates and all that kind of stuff, their ecosystem is really nice to be able to just take the laptop and hit a button and it does a lot of the stuff and finds out serial number and all that stuff. You don't have to do a lot of work, where some others you have to do a little work to get it to go.
I like that. I think that gives a really good context for those that may be thinking about these things. So before we kind of bring the conversation to a close, I want to ask a couple questions around the implications of AI and how that's kind of playing a role into maybe the cybersecurity side of things. Do you see it as something that's going to help? Do you think it's going to be something that's going to hurt? Do you think it's a mix of both and everything's just going to elevate? The hackers are going to get better, and yet same with security? Or kind of how do you see that unfolding, at least in today's day and age?
I think it's a combination of both.
She hit it.
It can be a really good thing, especially, and it gives you an avenue of especially when researching, by the fact of how it actually pulls all the information together and gives it to you in one summarized. And so it actually cuts some of that out as far as speeding it up, where as far as research is concerned, although in AI you still sometimes have to check the AI because sometimes it's wrong. The other thing why I think it's a bad thing is for the same reason, because someone will actually get to it, use it in a way that is very detrimental and very hurting to businesses, small, big, from 1 to 5 million. It's because it can actually, you can take AI, and I've seen this happen where it could go from deep fakes and they make deep fake videos, or manipulating the information that you put out and you put it into AI, because AI is only as smart as what you put in.
Yeah.
It's still a machine, and it's only as smart as what you put into it, and it's going to put it out. So if you put in the wrong information, or the information that's going to cause the most damage, it's gonna spit it out.
So, I agree with what she said. It is a blessing and a curse in the same breath, right? I use it extensively, so much so I actually have hey, Cindy.
He walks around with that all the time.
Cindy, so tell me, how do I start a podcast? What do I need?
All right, starting a podcast is pretty straightforward. You'll need a few basics: a good microphone, recording software, and a quiet space. Then you'll choose a platform to host your episodes. Do you have a topic in mind?
I would like to do a podcast on cybersecurity and all things computers. How would I do that?
Great topic. Start by outlining your episodes. Break it down into specific themes like cybersecurity basics, malware, or encryption. Then research and script each episode. For recording, you'll want to edit for clarity and quality. Finally, upload your episodes to a podcast hosting platform. Have you thought about your podcast name?
Thank you, Cindy. That's all.
You're welcome. Anytime.
So you can see how much we use it. We use it a lot. When we're doing for our blogs, it helps us design those. For our commercials that we do, general information. And the thing that's different with AI than like a Google search is that you can have a rolling conversation, like you and I talking, like say, hey Tanner, tell me how'd you cook that brisket? Well, I did X, Y, and Z. Well, but how do you make that sauce? What ingredients do I need? So I can have a rolling conversation with it like that, and it keeps giving me feedback, as you saw that I was doing. Kind of like when we saw in the old Star Trek shows, computer, and it would start having a conversation with them. Well, that's for real. The problem with it, that the problem side of it is that it does have some intelligence, and it can extrapolate and understand where you're going, and it will remember and add on to it. But you want to talk about invasion of privacy? Because it gets patterns. It knows that we do IT. It knows that if I start asking about certain kind of foods, it knows, okay, this is probably a dietary thing. If I ask about, hey, why do I have this wart on my arm? Okay, well, he has warts. What kind of wart is it? And so on. So it builds a profile. And we always talk about Big Brother watching. Well, they sold us the device to watch us. And we carry it. I mean, if you set your phone down and you walk to your car and you were at a bar or something, are you freaking out? Yeah. We go in the back of the club. Oh my God, my phone. Right? So that is the danger of it. That it's constantly learning where we go, who we see, what we do. So it builds this information and it gives it back in a conversational tone. And when asked, can give a report minute by minute of where we were, longitudes, latitudes, what cell tower we were close to, blah, blah, blah. And so we're giving away, quite frankly, our freedom, to be honest.
Because you look up the AI information and it has your patterns and your questions you've asked, and it can actually devise you based upon your questions.
Which has its pluses in the sense that I can go back and with a conversation I had a month ago and get like an aha moment, go like, oh yeah. and I can bring back up that conversation, and it'll pick up just like we just had it seconds ago. So it has its pluses, it has its minus. I think my fear is when they are truly able to marry this with robotics. Anybody who remembers Terminators, that's no bull. That's the real deal.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I really like it because it's definitely an area that I've been personally playing with a lot more. Very similar. I've been using ChatGPT specifically, paid version, all that kind of stuff, and
same here.
A lot of folks around me do the same thing, and I ask them one very specific question, and I'm like, "Oh, you're using it a bunch. Have you ever run out of memory?" They're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Have you ever given it so much information that you get the little notice saying you've run out of memory and you have to clear some? I've done that 3 times, and it's insane the level of response I can get out of my ChatGPT account now because I've given it so much. But now, on the flip side of it, I know it knows all that information, which can have negative implications as well. But on the flip side, there's some really cool stuff that it can do, because it's like, I had a conversation 3 weeks ago that I kind of knew about, but now I'm ready to pick that back up, go a little bit deeper. Now it has additional context from the 3 weeks after that conversation that can tie into it, and it's just a whole different thing that I can't get if I do a general Google search or something like that today.
Yes. Right. I wait for the day that one of these things start talking in court against the person that was using it every day.
There's a scary thought.
Yes.
I want to say this about ByteBak. And one of the things that I think that really makes us different from the other, and Kim alluded to it earlier, that we get to know, we want to meet your network, is the guidance that we give people. That's really what it's about, because we're small business owners, and we recognize that other small business owners don't have an ocean full of cash. And if they did, they probably wouldn't be talking to us. We will talk to our clients. We get to know what is their current needs and what is their aspirations. This is where I want to take my business, and how do they want to move it, and what their finances look like, to get a feel for their finances. I'm not trying to count somebody's pockets, how much money you got, but more to guide you in a way that we can achieve your business aspirations and your goals and aspirations in an affordable way. That everything fits together in such a way that we don't buy, like going to the store hungry. You buy a bunch of food, but none of it makes the meal. You can do the same thing in the IT world, that you can buy all this stuff, and you literally have to get rid of some of the stuff that you just bought because it doesn't work with the new stuff that you're getting, and you need that to fulfill your goals and to move towards your aspirations. So the guidance that we give people is the big deal, and I think most importantly is when we do something for somebody, it's like we're signing our name on it. We did this. And so we take that kind of ownership and that kind of pride in what we do, because it's quite frankly, it has to work. Your business counts on it. We count on you. We want to make sure that it works for you. And when it doesn't, we take that seriously and feel responsible to get it going for you.
Yeah, we do. The way I look at it is, we're a small business, but we're providing you enterprise level support.
Ooh. That is, I think, one of the most important things that any small business can hear is how can they really bring in that level of support with someone who really understands the small business side of things as well. So I'm going to highly encourage everyone who's listening to this or watching this right now, you've got to reach out to Gregory and Kimberly here and get to know them. Get to know, bring them in, have that first conversation. But how can we, for the audience, how do we give them more information? Where can they go for more information on ByteBak? What's the best way to contact y'all? I know you mentioned a blog or a newsletter. Let's give the audience some information on how they can connect with y'all.
Well, we have a website, www.bytebak.net. Again, that's spelled BYTEBAK. There's no C. .net in the name. We do put out a blog. Between the two of us, we make sure we try to put out one a week on various topics. And there's always something new that's going on, and we try to put that out that information. As I said in the beginning of this, I think before we started going on air here, is to educate people. So they can reach us through that. They can always reach us at info@bytebak.net as the email, and of course they can just pick up the phone and call, because as you can see, we like to talk. It's 737-263-2323. 737-263-2323 is the phone number. And so any of those ways, info@bytebak.net, the phone number, and please visit our website and check out our blogs. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And we try to put the blogs on those places too.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to highly encourage everyone on, listening to this to, at a minimum, send a quick note and say, hey, saw you on the podcast. Great conversation, especially if you're here in the local area, the greater Austin area. It's always good to make those connections. So highly encourage you all to reach out, just say hi, really make that connection, continue the local business trend here. But I just want to say thank you. Gregory, Kimberly, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know I could sit here and probably talk for another hour, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And this has been absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Tanner. We appreciate it.